Right, so unfortunately, just because of my computer and apparently my lighting too, don't have like a fancy background to some of the other people. Um, so just a little bit about myself. I was a student. I am a recent grad from the University of Ottawa. It's like a really long title, Bachelor of Arts Honors in Geography with a minor in French as a second language and co-op. I graduated in December, and I'm currently working at DatsCan as a statistical assistant with the International Geographic Database Project, which is a collaboration between Statistics Canada and Elections Canada, containing road names and addresses used for the federal elections and the census. So yeah, I just look up stuff on maps for my job. And there are like some three fun facts about me because like there's always like once a month. It's gotten a lot less frequent because I'm seeing people less frequently these days. But first thing is my legal name is not actually Drew. My full name is Andrew. Hugh gasps. Yeah, so like the disciple who is like mentioned in the story. And I lived in Abu Dhabi for 10 years in the Middle East. That is like in the Arabian Peninsula next to Saudi Arabia, in case you do not have geographical context for that. And that was like a really transformative part of my life. And if there are things that I say or things that I do that you make you think, oh, that's not what a normal Canadian would do, that's probably why. So, like for example, this weather is like pretty normal for like April. And the humidity is usually much worse because we live next to the ocean. And I was also homeschooled all the way through grade 12. Like Ottawa was the first time I went to an actual brick and mortar school, and like it was a pretty seamless transition because I did online school for like all of high school, and it was like pretty similar. Okay, so I'm just gonna read the story. If you want to turn to your Bibles, it's John 6, verses 1 to 15. And so this is the third miracle in the Gospel of John. After this, Jesus went away to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, which is the Sea of Tiberias, and a large crowd was following him, because they saw the signs that he was doing on the sick. Jesus went up on the mountain, and there he sat down with his disciples. Now the Passover, the feast of the Jews, was at hand. Lifting up his eyes, then, and seeing the large crowd was coming toward him, Jesus said to Philip, "Where are we to buy bread, so that these people may eat?" He said this to test him, for he himself knew what he would do. Philip answered him, 200 denarii worth of bread would not be enough for each of them to get a little. One of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, said to him, "There is a boy here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. But what are they for so many?" Jesus said, "Have the people sit down." Now there was much grass in the place. So the men sat down, about 5,000 in number. Jesus then took the loaves, and when he had given thanks, he distributed them to those who were seated, so also the fish, as much as they wanted. And when they had eaten their fill, he told his disciples, "Gather up the leftover fragments, that nothing may be lost." So they gathered them up and filled 12 baskets with fragments from the 5 barley loaves, left by those who had eaten. When the people saw the sign that he had done, they said, "This is indeed the prophet who has come into the world." Perceiving then that they were about to come and take him by force to make him king, Jesus withdrew again to the mountain by himself. Great. So I guess another important fact about me, like some people may know this already, I was a small group leader with InterVarsity for a year in my 3rd year of university. So I'm a big fan of the inductive Bible study method. Like not everybody likes it, but that's kind of like how I'm going to format my talk today. And also that I lead a guys Bible study in my church, so I adopted those methods there. So I'm just going to start off with some context, just because it really helps us get into the shoes of the people that were witnessing this event. So, well, first off, this is like pretty close to what Sue was talking about last week about being the bread of life. It's like 2 stories before it. And it's all like in the previous section, Jesus claims he has the authority from the Father as the Son of God, and that John the Baptist and other Old Testament heroes of the faith were witnesses to him as that. And that was pretty controversial because he was claiming to be God, which is essentially blasphemy. but it's also like this big theme about the Gospel of John is that he is really like pointing out that Jesus is God. Like that's an important theme, and I will bring that up later. So in verse 1, might have been a little bit confused by this, but the Sea of Tiberias or Galilee is referring to a lake, I believe is along the border between Israel and Jordan, fed by the Jordan River from the north, which spills into the Jordan River at the south, and it is pretty big and measures around 11.3 kilometers wide and 12 kilometers long. And that archaeological discoveries have been made around the sea, like from the first century, which include like a boat and coastal cities, including Tiberias and Capernaum, which are mentioned like in the gospel. And also like verse 3, mountain refers to the infamous Golan Heights east of the sea. Like they're in modern day Israel, there have been a lot of battles with like Palestine and other Middle Eastern countries. So like Israel did not have the Golan Heights before, but like it claimed it. There's a lot of contention around that. Like if you're in the Middle East for any period of time, like you will probably hear about that. And then verse 7, one denarius, like this is also a note in most people's Bibles, but it would have been 1 day's pay for an average laborer, which would have been, you know, most of the audience like for this miracle. And there's all 200 denarii is like 8 months wages. So like I guess in context, I make a lot more. It'd be like spending $20,000 on bread. And that's also a lot of people. In verse 9, barley bread was popular among the poor at the time. The rich preferred wheat, which is kind of ironic because like most of our bread's made of wheat. Hooray, technology. And then fish would have been either dried or preserved or pickled, which I find kind of gross. Probably then I wouldn't enjoy living at that time. And verses 10 to 11. So like the 5,000 refers just to men, but like estimates with women or kids would have been around 20,000 people, which is like just even more mind blowing. Just because like imagining having to try and provide food and fish, like that, bread and fish for 20,000 people. That's a lot. That's like a small city. And there's also parallels with Numbers 11, which I'll also talk about later. And then verse 14. The crowd would have viewed Jesus as a fulfillment of future prophet after Moses, reference in Deuteronomy 18, 15 to 18, which was the person who will speak like with God and tell the people what he says. So like, and also in this case, it would have been like possibility of like a military leader to overthrow the Romans because the Romans were ruling the area at the time and they were not very happy about it. They weren't respecting like their religion or their rights. You know, it's like, oh, we were really great. And we were a great nation, and now we're subjugated. And, oh, that's nice. Nice stuff. You can enjoy your pickled fish. I'll hard pass. Right. So, and then also like something for I also go to Celebration Church, and like for some people here go there as well. Like my pastors have been like was going through Hebrews, and like he's been talking about this theme of like holy dissatisfaction, which means nothing in this world satisfies us. And I will come back to that. So the story is rather short compared to what Stephen spoke on last week. And Jesus' miracles have been very popular as people seek to be miraculously healed. And he's also made a few claims about himself that would have been viewed as outrageous at the time, as I said, because it would have been considered blasphemy. And that was like against the law, you would have been stoned. And the reason why John includes that in here is because the Gospel of John is like different compared to the other three Gospels, which are commonly known as the Synoptic Gospels, because it focuses more on establishing the divinity of God and does not have a genealogy or birth story like Matthew or Luke to show like his humanness or like legitimacy as the Messiah, like our son of David. And there are also some stories that do not appear in the other Gospels. Nonetheless, this is not a first-year theology class where we're going to debate the origins and similarities of the Gospels. I would love to discuss that at a later time, though, so, like, I guess stay tuned. However, like something interesting is that its popularity contrasts with the stated mission of declaring the kingdom of God and calling on people to repent of their sins and believe, at least in the Gospel of Mark. At the same time, Jesus would have been wary about making claims to be the Messiah, because as I said, the Messiah was associated with a human deliverer, the country of Israel from the rule of Rome. And like for those of you who have studied church history, like you know how that ended decades after Jesus lived. So it was kind of saving Israel, like the Jews, from an imminent doom. And also the crowd would have been poor farmers and fishermen attracted by his message of the coming kingdom of God and all the stories of his miracles. They had come a long distance, being in the middle of nowhere. It was pretty remote. So Jesus saw a hungry crowd desperate for nourishment physically and spiritually. But the disciples saw as many thousands of miles that they could not afford to feed. And like the fact that they care enough to like try and figure out how to provide for them is because hospitality ran deep and still does in many Middle Eastern cultures. And Jesus also saw a repeat of the story in Numbers 11, with a crowd representing the millions of tired, hungry, and scared Israelites who were wandering in the desert after escaping the Egyptians. And in their fear and fatigue, they started complaining like against God, like that he wasn't providing for them. They're all going to die in the desert. Very catastrophic and dramatic. And God responded by getting angry and starting to burn parts of the camp and send plagues through disobedience. You can also have arguments about why the Old Testament God was much more harsh and like willing to like destroy whole people groups compared to the New Testament God and Jesus, but that's also not the point of this talk. So I will move on. And Jesus, out of the same pity and mercy God showed to the Israelites a couple thousand years before, like just wanted to provide for the people who are literally hungry and thirsty running after him, which is like, you know, there's like a lot of like cheesy Christianese phrase like we have to be hungry and thirsty for God, but these people were literally like hungry and thirsty because they were chasing after Jesus, even though they didn't know he was God. And so he chose to do it in an incredible way. Barley bread and fish would have been like an ordinary peanut butter and jam or ham and cheese sandwich for us. It wasn't very spectacular. Like, it was a very ordinary meal. Like, and as I said, it was popular with poor people. In fact, it was only enough for one boy. Nonetheless, Jesus did something super crazy when he turned 5 loaves of bread and 3 fish into enough for around 20,000 people. The size of a small city. Like, when I actually thought about that, that's crazy. That's wild. And also, the disciples collected 12 baskets. The exact size was a matter of debate and relevant to this top worth of scraps. So as you can probably tell, there's a lot of symbolism and a lot of context. Like you could take this story or even like the whole gospel in so many different ways. But like that's not the point of like what I'm going to share here. So the crowd was amazed and convinced he was the prophet promised to come after Moses to lead the people. Although their idea after like so many years of oppression, their idea of who Jesus was kind of skewed. And Jesus was wary about being the military leader of a poor ragtag group of Jews against a much stronger, well-trained Roman army. Unless there was like some stroke of luck, there would have not ended well for them. So he wisely decided to stay back and not be taken in by the crowd. And then later that night, the disciples crossed the Sea of Galilee towards Capernaum. Jesus joined another miracle, which we discussed at a later date, and which brings us to Stephen's story and Jesus' somewhat long-winded explanation of how he is the bread of life, which disappoints many people in the crowd who decided to stop following him. And like these people were all like very excited and like, so it's like really interesting just seeing how all these things connect. And the fact that I'm speaking on something that occurred before Stephen's story from last week. Interesting to think about. And yeah, so I guess it's important to check what your motivations are for following Jesus and to make sure they're in line with his message. Otherwise, when you inevitably fall short, like not him, like your expectations, you'll be sad and tempted to turn away. The caveat is it's not Jesus' fault, it's that your expectations weren't like right. So how does this relate to us being stuck inside in the midst of a global pandemic and Stephen's talk from last week? Like we're kind of distant, like thousands of years, like geography, culture, religion, like there's so many things different. So like how can like we bridge these two things together? So here are 3 key points, and I apologize if these are really super cliche but like they're super true. First one is Jesus sees our needs. And what I mean by that is like you did with the crowd so many years ago, Jesus knows our needs and wants. Like, yes, even our wants. Even before we do. It may be controversial to say, but Jesus cares more about us than ourselves, our friends, our family, and our government could ever care about ourselves. And like goes above and beyond to provide for us. He may not have the same priorities as us, but he knows what we need and when we need it. Yeah. And then the second one is Jesus will make a way to provide for our needs, sometimes miraculously. How Jesus will work as a provider in our lives may not be as miraculous as Jesus turning 5 barley loaves and 3 fish into enough food for 20,000 people. It may be as simple as enough money to pay our bills for each week, a friend dropping off a meal at a safe distance, when we are struggling financially and emotionally with self-isolation. A good grade on an exam we studied hard for, or that we didn't study hard for. You never know what situation you're going through at the moment. Or even safe travels to a concert or conference, either in the city or far away back in pre-pandemic times. Either way, Jesus will provide for you. It just may not be the way that you think, or the way that you want, or even the things that you want, but he will still provide for you. I get, like, for example, I want a nice car and a new phone, but like Jesus has other things in mind for me, apparently. And also the fact that I don't really need them during this time. I guess the way this is shown itself in my life occurs like when I'm reflecting on how like Jesus set me up really well for this pandemic, like in ways that I didn't even realize at the time. So I graduated university in December last year, as I said before. I mean, I did not deal with the nonsense of everything transitioning to online and dealing with like profs who are incompetent with technology and like online exams and like pass failing everything, and like hearing all my friends talking about that, like I empathized with them, but I was just like, I am like so happy I don't have to deal with this nonsense right now. Very thankful. I got a job with the people I used to work with or as a co-op student 3 years ago at StatsCan. And because my work is considered mission critical, because I work with the census, I generally always have and just the nature of that product, there's always like updates for roads and addresses. They may not always be right, but there's always like updates that need to be reviewed. And my team is awesome and trust me so much that they actually sent me over to Gatineau. I had like a fancy letter and everything. I mean, the story is enigmatic and not something I'm going to share, but like I went over to Gatineau to get another laptop so I can do updates on the actual database. And then, which like was part like of the reason, or part of the reason that they decided to extend my contract all the way until next March. So I don't have to worry about finances or even trying to find a new job during the pandemic. But like, I mean, who knows what life's going to be like next March, but it's just nice not having to think about that for a while. And I'm well provided for at home since both of my parents are able to keep working. And no matter what my housing situation looks like in the fall, I know I'll be well taken care of out here in Stitz Vegas. And also, I'm like, well, the University of Ottawa came through and decided to hold virtual convocations for all the graduates, with the possibility of walking across the stage next year if public health guidelines allow. So, yeah, God does provide, especially in ways we would not expect. And like, you may not be aware of it at the time, like especially as I was, but like he does things for a reason. Like I don't need to worry about anything. And, like, I may still worry, but the truth kind of like smacks me in the face. Like I literally don't worry. God's got this. He's providing for me. And the final point is Jesus is more than just a prophet and good teacher. He is the savior of the world and the Son of God. And something John alludes to in his gospel that the crowd missed is that Jesus is more than just a prophet and an amazing teacher. He could have done just that, but he would not have had the impact on the world if he did not cause controversy with the religious leaders and Roman officials. Spoilers, him being killed in the most excruciating, cruel way possible at the time, and coming on a cross, and coming back to life 3 days later, victorious over death and sin forever and throughout the rest of history. all that can be concluded for Jesus magically multiplying bread and fish for a humongous crowd of first century Jews. And as I said, like my pastor, as we've been going through slowly, very slowly, through the book of Hebrews, there's just a whole theme of like holy dissatisfaction and that nothing in the world satisfies us. And there's this theme of how we're like sojourners and like we're meant for a heavenly home. Like the fact that Jesus is more than just a human, but like he's like making a way for us to go back to our heavenly home and like is able just to be enough and provide for us through whatever situation we may be going through. And like the fact that things that we think have like meaning, like money and jobs and houses and cars and clothes and devices and fame and fortune, all of those things can like go away in an instant. But Jesus is like enough and much more satisfactory than that. So that's it.